Welcome everybody to this webinar, Sociocracy in Community, brought to you by Sociocracy For All. I'm Jerry Koch-Gonzalez. So who is Sociocracy For All? We're a nonprofit based in Amherst, Massachusetts, USA, operating and training globally. And our mission is to spread sociocracy for a more cooperative world. And a key element of that for us is making sociocracy accessible both in the ease of access to materials that are easy to understand and accessible financially, so that it doesn't cost a whole lot to be able to learn about sociocracy. We produce videos, webinars like this one. We do training, both online and in person. We write articles. We're working on translations into several various languages. We support communities of practice so that people can keep learning. We support the development of trainers and consultants, and we support implementations of sociocracy in communities and other organizations. So maybe first a little bit about me, my experience in community. I've been living in cooperative housing since my, third year of college, 1973, tells you that I'm an old guy. I was a founding member of Pioneer Valley Co-housing Community in 1994. And that's the community where we live, and us gathered in our courtyard. And that's me, the guy with the blue shirt below the arrow. I am a certified nonviolent communication trainer and also, certified sociocracy trainer and consultant. I discovered sociocracy in about 2007 and have been sort of teaching that ever since. I used to teach consensus, and when I discovered sociocracy, I went, this is kind of the resolution of some of the issues that I've been discovering with consensus. Consensus worked well for me when I was part of a group with very high degree of shared values and high degree of shared skills, but wasn't true in community. We didn't have the same level of skill and same level of shared values, and then consensus was a lot harder. And Pioneer Valley Co-housing did adopt sociocracy in 2013, so we've got a few years of experience now. And Ted, who you saw just a moment before, Ted and I co-founded Sociocracy For All in May 2016, so we're just about to hit our second anniversary. So why community? Because we want meaningful connection with people, right? Because we want to live cooperatively with people and the planet. Because we want to live in an island of sanity, away from the painful experience of power over autocracies and the tyrannies of majority rule. And we want to contribute to social change by modeling heartful ways of living. What is an intentional community? So a group of people with an idea, why don't we live together, is not an intentional community. An intentional community is an organization of people with a shared aim, a decision-making process, an organizational framework, and a process for continual evolution. The tradition in intentional communities is that, we want shared decision-making, and we do it through consensus. At least in the United States, consensus is the standard way that any co-housing community makes decisions. Sociocracy has only come on recently and creating a different option than just consensus. So the ideal, shared decision-making, we all decide together. But the reality is sometimes more challenged. Why do communities struggle? They struggle because decision-making is hard, and consensus in particular can take a long time. There's a sense that everybody has to decide everything, not enough delegation. Coming to decisions takes a lot of energy. Doers burn out because they want to get things done, but they have to ask permission for the community, so things are slow, operational tasks can be slow. And some people have a disproportionately strong or disproportionately weak voice. Another aspect is that, most of us coming to communities, we're coming from this history of fear and historical pain of power over. So we come with that desire, let's not have any leaders telling us what to do. So sometimes we throw out the concept of leadership in the avoidance of power over. Because it sometimes can be hard to be heard in consensus, especially when we're working in large groups, where what happens is often more debate than listening, then unless I keep advocating for my needs won't be held precious by other people. And what happens often is that those who repeat themselves in discussions, often and loudly, are the ones who win, the ones who get what they want. And a few people wind up doing most of the work. There's low accountability and low support. Now, these are the reasons why communities struggle, and not all communities struggle to the same extent. We certainly had our struggles in Pioneer Valley cohousing, where we live, but we also a very functional community. And there are many communities who have some forms of consensus that work pretty well. So this is more for those who feel the pain and want to think about a more effective way to make decisions to be organized. Sociocracy. Sociocracy has several key elements. So decision-making by consent, organizational structure by linked circles, and a continuous evolution through feedback. So a little bit more about each of those. Consent decision-making. What are some of the key kind of aspects of that? We meet in circles, meaning a small group of people, and we do lots of rounds, meaning each person in the circle gets a turn. And each member gets to consent or object to the decisions that we make. This is very different than when we work in the large whole group where there isn't time to do rounds. You don't do rounds of 40 or 50 people in a meeting. That'll be the whole meeting. So small groups working by consent, doing rounds. Consent means a decision is made when there is no more objections. And look at it, think of it this way. There is a proposal on the table, and we make the distinction between, okay, this would be my preference to do it this way, but I could work with this even though it's not my preference, which means I can allow the process to move forward, or I say this proposal would interfere with our aim. And so yes, then in that context, I would object. So my preference and what I can work with, those are both aspects of when we say, yes, I consent, no objection. But if it's going to interfere with the aim of our community, then it's important for us to object. And objections, just to say one more thing about that, objections are a gift because they help us come up with a more effective proposal that is going to meet more needs in the community. So don't think of objections as blocks, as the end of the process, but they're just a beginning of the next round of exploration. Besides consent decision-making, another core element is a circle structure. Every community will have a number of different teams that do its work. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of a idealized version. It's based partly on our own community. You can imagine an intentional community having 4 core circles that divide up pretty much almost all the work of the community. One might be the buildings and grounds circle. They might be taking care, particularly in a condominium, of the roofs and the siding, of the roadways in the community, of the key elements of the common buildings, like the furnaces or boilers, sprinkler systems, trucks that you might have, plows, snow blowers, those kinds of things. So their aim would be to take care of the infrastructure of the community. Another circle might be the common house circle. It's one of the hallmarks of co-housing and intentional communities that we have a common space, a common house or common building where we can come together for meals, for events, and those spaces need to be taken care of. and policies need to be made about how they are used. So the common house circle has its aim to maintain the use of the common house in as effective way as possible for the benefit of the community. Then we might have a circle called plants and animals. What is the, we live on a piece of land. So this circle would have the responsibility of care for the gardens, the orchard, whatever is growing plants or animals in our community. And the fourth circle may be called community life, everything that has to do with people. Each of these circles may have subcircles. So each subcircle carries a piece of the larger aim of its parent circle. So buildings and grounds may have a subcircle that takes care of the workshop building. The plants and animals circle may have a subcircle taking care of the vegetable garden. The common house may have a subcircle dealing with the kitchen and with the basement where the sauna and the exercise room and the ping pong table, those kinds of things might be. Community life is maybe more complex, has all the various things that have to do with human beings. The finances, collecting the fees and paying out the bills. Care and counsel, which might take care of helping people who have broken a leg or people who are in some kind of conflict, all the kinds of things for supporting people. Might be a circle for events and rituals. What is it that brings kind of life to the sense of community? Yeah. And there might be a circle that organizes or keeps track of the community work, keeping track of who's washing dishes, who's cooking meals, who's mowing the lawns, who's fixing things, etc. The four core circles that you see here with the large circles all come together to share information through what we call the general circle. And this is not the full community circle of all the members, but just the leaders and the delegates of those four groups. In the context of communities, which are usually very horizontal, each of the main circles select their own leaders and select their own delegates. And those 8 people serve on the general circle. Every circle has choice about who its members are. So the general circle also says, yes, we welcome you, leader of buildings and grounds. Yes, we welcome you, delegate from community life, as a member of the general circle. In more traditional organizations where there's more of a hierarchy, it would be the general circle that selects the leaders for the main working circles. And this concept of double linking is very critical in sociocracy because it ensures that not only information and influence is working top down, but also bottom up, or from the center of things to the periphery, and from the periphery of things to the center, from the more abstract to the more concrete, from the more concrete to the more abstract. There's not a valuing of one being more important than the other. We need all the levels to work effectively. Besides, so every organization, besides its general circle, which is more an administrative kind of day-to-day management group, it needs a mission circle, or what we sometimes call the board of directors or board of trustees or council of elders, multiple names for this. The mission circle is responsible for ensuring that the community stays true to its aim. And helps bring in the influence from the outside world. So in a community on your mission circle, you might want to have someone who's a permaculture expert who doesn't live in your community, but could bring in that kind of expertise. You might want to have on your mission circle someone from another community, a neighboring community, so that you have some back and forth information and flow about what are their best practices compared to our best practices. The general circle also selects its own leader, or the mission circle selects a leader for the general circle who holds a responsibility for the whole of the community, making sure that all the elements are working effectively. And maybe I'll add to that that each circle is responsible for the effectiveness of the circles that are connected to them. So if the buildings and grounds circle were to start falling apart, well, the general circle would be responsible for ensuring that buildings and grounds could be reconstituted, re-enlivened so that it was effective again. From the mission circle, or connection between the general circle and the mission circle, would be the leader and delegate of the general circle also serve on the mission circle. And you may have other people from your community serving on the mission circle. It's sort of from the general membership. There's a lot more to say about mission circles and boards of directors, which we don't have time at this point in this presentation, but we might be able to talk about that in the questions and answers. Not everybody in a community is in a circle. Some people may just be doing task work for the different circles. The circles really are the primary purpose of circles is to make policy decisions that govern the work that circle is responsible for. Most of the time, our lives in communities are not in meetings, and they're not making policy. Most of the time that we spend in communities is doing work. We're cooking, you know, we're washing dishes, we're cleaning the common house, we're mowing the lawns, we're planting trees, etc. So there may be many tasks that are done by people who are not in a policy-making aspect of a circle, but do tasks for them. For example, I am the cartwright for my community. I fix garden carts, and we have like 15 of them because we use them to bring our things from the parking lots to the houses, or carry around the yard waste, etc., from the community. So I repair the carts, but I'm not in the buildings and grounds circle. I just do a task. And that's what these stars represent in this diagram. Is there may be people who do particular tasks in these various circles. The third aspect, so with the first two aspects, consent decision making, the second was organizational structure by linked circles, and the third is feedback. Without feedback, we atrophy, we die. So feedback is about how can we continuously improve our communication skills, our operations, and our governance process. And we do this by, you know, asking for, getting feedback. And we can do that in many different kinds of ways. Every meeting can have an evaluation so that we can notice, you know, how we want to improve that meeting the next time, how we want to improve our individual participation in meetings into the future. Without feedback, people can kind of misbehave in a meeting and never get asked to be accountable, never get support for changing how they behave. Role improvement. So we can do particular attention to giving feedback to a facilitator or to a leader, and ask and go through the process where they would self-evaluate what they do well, what they could do better, and then each person in the team who's doing the evaluation, the role improvement feedback, could say what they see this person doing well and what they could improve, and the focus person can then reflect on what they've heard and come up with a plan for how they can improve their skills and their way of operating. And any policy that the community makes, whether it's a pet policy or policies about work, all of those policies would have a term end. Let's have this policy for 2 years or 6 months, and at that time, let's evaluate it. Let's see how well it's working and see if we want to amend it. So policies are not set in stone, they are living documents, they can change. And the feedback loop, you know, we make a plan with the best information that we have, we carry it out, and then we evaluate. We measure and evaluate, and from that evaluation, we make a new plan. And that's the feedback cycle: plan, do, evaluate. And we do that over and over and over again as we strive to contribute towards the aim that we have for our community. And so I've told you a bit about how sociocracy functions, the main principles. Maybe you want to know, is anybody doing this? And yes, quite a few communities are doing it, and the numbers are growing almost every day. Here's a few. So the tree co-housing community within the Ithaca Eco Village in New York. Pioneer Valley Co-housing, where Ted and I live. Belfast Co-housing in Maine. Rocky Corner in Connecticut, Harts Mill in North Carolina, Cambridge Co-housing in Massachusetts, Columbia Eco Village, Oregon, Quimper Village in Washington, and they're all over the world as well. We don't have as much information about that, but Cohabitat Quebec in Canada, Narara Eco Village in Australia. The Global Eco Village Network is parts of that organization are operating sociocratically, and some of their communities in Latin America in particular are working sociocratically. And I know that there's other communities in Europe and in other places, we don't have all the detail of that information. So what happens? Sociocracy and community. What's the changes? Moving from trying to make decisions in the whole group to making those decisions in the smaller groups, in all those work circles and sub-circles that we named. So decisions are more delegated, authority is more distributed. The working groups are small enough so that you can do real listening to each other, and it's a place where you can effectively do rounds where everyone's voice really matters, which leads to trust. Trust in the sense that your voice can be heard because you're a small group, you're doing rounds, you know that your turn will come, you don't have to overtalk, you don't have to interrupt somebody or have enough courage to speak up in a large group. For sociocracy to work, part of that dynamic is that every circle making decisions needs to then seek feedback from the community, the outside of their own circle. So if my circle is making decisions about the pet policy, it becomes really important to gather feedback from the whole community about what are the key elements that they see need to be included. And once we have a draft policy, what it is that they like or don't like about that policy so that we can make the most informed decision possible. With sociocracy and the notion of receiving feedback, we can show up as full human beings. We can show up as imperfect as we are, and if we're willing to receive feedback, then we receive gifts from other people rather than criticism. In the context of continuous development of us as individuals, how do we become the people we want to be, who we want to see in the world? The decision-making process allows us to integrate objections. So objections are not so much of a block or a problem, but something that we process. And we have tools for dealing with objections that allow us to keep moving forward and build a trust that yes, you can object and your voice will be heard, and we'll work it to find a way that we can move forward. What's the impact? What we've experienced as the impact in communities that have adopted sociocracy is that there is more widespread leadership. Since they're distributed, since the authority is distributed into various different groups, each one of those groups has its own leadership, its own facilitator, secretary, and so those folks are getting more experience in taking leadership roles within the community. Distributed authority also means that more people have more of a sense of say. And more buy-in, more participation, more sense of responsibility for their piece of the work. With a greater sense of being heard, there is then less conflict and more things getting done, which opens up more space in our communities to be able to start thinking about the future and not just simply do the day-to-day management. Where are we going with our community? What is our long-term aim? What happens if we are aging in community? How are we thinking about that? how do we want to think about how, what impact, what contribution our community could be making in the larger world towards the changes that we want to see in the world. And we get to spend more time with a sense of community. The change from having debates in our general circle, in our full community meetings. Now, when we have a full community meeting, we can do several different things. We can give feedback to groups that, to the circles that are developing some proposal and would like some feedback. We can do community education. It could be education about sociocracy. It could be education about nonviolent communication. It could be education about the land that we're sitting on and how to best do the farming and husbandry and orcharding that we want to do on the land. So there's all sorts of possible forms of education that we could do in those whole community meetings. And perhaps best of all, we can spend time in whole community meetings building our sense of community, sharing each other life stories, sharing our hardships, sharing what is the moment that we are in our particular lives. Do that in large groups, small groups, so that we keep building the interconnection among people who we live with. How can we go about implementing sociocracy in our communities? One of the very first things is start a study group. It takes a one burning soul to begin and gather some friends around you who have concerns about governance, who have some interest in exploring. So start a study group, an implementation, a group that will move towards implementation. You want to increase the number of people in the community who know about sociocracy so that everyone knows a bit, many know more and have some practice, and at least a few know a lot. So you can do educational processes in your whole community meetings, like I was talking before. You can do small-scale implementations. Within just one team, you can practice rounds. Within one team, you can practice doing reviews of policy. Within one team, you can practice doing performance reviews of people who are facilitating. You can practice doing meeting evaluations if you don't already do that. You would need to write a governance document that outlines the principles of sociocracy and how it's going to be applied in the community, and design a circle structure, such as a circle structure that you were looking at before. You can kick off the process by doing an educational workshop so that everybody has a better understanding of sociocracy, or you can also do a launching retreat once you're ready to implement and go through the process of forming the groups, selecting people into roles in those groups, and so on. And you also want to plan for ongoing learning, continuous learning in those areas of communication, the content of our work, governance. And don't forget, orienting new members. Because if you don't orient the new members are coming in with their old school ways of thinking. They will start moving the community back towards consensus or to majority rule or to the ways of doing it in the past. To help in implementations, Sociocracy for All has lots of resources. So online, on our website, we have videos, we have articles, we have webinars, we put on conferences. We have a particular study group curriculum that's very easy to implement. It's 6 sessions for 90 minutes each, and it doesn't require anybody with a lot of experience, just somebody who's willing to hold the container of the group. And we can support you in doing that study group. We have a training program called Sociocracy Leadership Training, which is a learn by doing. It's a short-term, like 9-week process, and we're starting one cycle today. We'll start another cycle probably in mid-September of this year, or of any year. There would be a number of these programs going. We are publishing a book called Many Voices, One Song. As I speak now, in April 2018, we're taking pre-orders, and it will be the books that are pre-ordered will be sent out in June 2018. And this book has just lots of detail, lots and lots of detail. So it really is a reference book for anyone who's implementing sociocracy. You can hire us to be on retainer to meet with your group once a month or however frequently you want to support you in the implementation process, and call us in to do workshops. We also have communities of practice. We have one for intentional communities where people who are in intentional communities that are already practicing sociocracy, those folks can get together and talk to each other about how to improve their practices. We have sample governance documents available on our website, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And there are case studies also on our website of communities that have adopted sociocracy and what they went through to get there.